From January to August 2015, over 350,000 migrants had been detected on Europe's borders. That's the highest figure ever recorded and is likely still short of the real total. Every day brings new images of migrant protests in Hungary or dead children being pulled from the sea after a failed Mediterranean crossing. It's been called the worst crisis in a generation. Amid the sound and the fury from the media, hard facts can be hard to come by. But look closely and you'll find there are some inarguable truths about Europe's current crisis. Number 5. It's closer to a refugee crisis. Most of the press has so far characterized the crisis as being about migrants. The UN disagrees. On July 1, 2015, they released a statement on their investigations into the 137,000 people who had by that point crossed the Mediterranean this year. They concluded that the vast majority of them would be better classified as refugees. This has sparked an important, and emotional, debate in Europe's media. Outlets like the BBC have chosen to keep using the term migrant as it is technically correct, arguing that it is neutral and accurately describes both the refugee majority and the economic migrants arriving with them. Others strongly disagree. Because migrant denotes voluntary action, the UN has suggested that it shouldn't be used where the refugees are concerned. Al Jazeera has argued that the term is used as an insult these days and dehumanizes both groups. The UK's Channel 4 and The Guardian agree, and The Washington Post has expressed similar reservations. This is important because the language surrounding migrants has become toxic in recent weeks. UK tabloids have reported on swarms or hordes of marauding migrants preparing an invasion. One prominent columnist even called those dying in the Mediterranean cockroaches. It is unlikely that such things would be written about refugees, especially considering where most of them have come from. Number 4. Over the last couple of years, Hungary has opened its doors to nearly 130,000 asylum seekers. While this isn't a big number, Hungary's population is so small that it's creating nightmarish challenges. As one of the main routes for refugees coming through the Balkans, this tiny nation has seen a tide of humanity passing over its doorstep. Leaders have responded by shutting refugees out of its train stations and refusing them onward passage to Germany. Farther south, parts of Greece have been similarly overwhelmed. Already in dire straits financially, the tiny nation has been unable to process thousands upon thousands of applications. As a result, places like the island of Lesbos have seen their population balloon from 90,000 to around 110,000 as 2,000 new refugees land every day. The result has frequently been squalor, as thousands of people are herded into temporary camps that the government can't afford to maintain properly. Even the countries which pride themselves on being open to refugees may be having more trouble than they're letting on. Although Germany has flung its doors open to Syrians, The Economist claims that the country is politically reaching its breaking point. Number 3. The UK is especially conflicted. With their shared language, many Americans interested in the refugee crisis are turning to the UK for news. However, the UK response has been especially conflicted, with the media blowing it up into a political ball game. Recent polls have shown that the country doesn't know how it wants to respond to the crisis. One poll reported by ITV declared that roughly half of the British public wants all refugees blocked from entering the country. When asked specifically about people fleeing the Syrian civil war, 47% of respondents said that they shouldn't be welcomed into the UK. When asked more broadly about those fleeing conflict, 42% still preferred to close the borders. Other polls have contradicted this. One commissioned by YouGov last summer found that 8 in 10 young Brits were proud of their country's history of tolerance toward refugees. Different regions are also hugely divided. While pledging to do more to help the refugees, Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has publicly berated David Cameron for refusing to accept more than 300 Syrian refugees. Members of the Prime Minister's own party have called his response to the crisis shameful. The media, meanwhile, is tearing itself apart. Toxic language is becoming the norm as the tabloids battle the broadsheets. Interestingly, This is happening despite the UK having one of the lowest levels of migrant influx on the continent. Number 2. The effects on the economy are more positive than you think. In Europe, the refugee debate often focuses on the effects that an influx of people will have on a nation's economy. Many believe that migrants and refugees are lured in by excessively generous welfare benefits. This belief is especially prevalent in Britain. It's also far from the full picture. The welfare state in Britain is fairly miserly. In a 2012 European Commission report, the UK was ranked alongside Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Estonia, and Malta for its relatively tight welfare. Belgium, Denmark, Portugal, Spain, Finland, and the Netherlands ranked highest. It is also hard for migrants to claim unemployment benefits, job seekers allowance, in the UK, requiring migrants to be in the country for over 3 months and to prove that they are likely to get work. Even then, they can only claim benefits for 6 months unless they get a job offer. For refugees, the controls are even tighter. In the UK, asylum seekers receive a mere £36.95 a week to live on, lower than in France. Refugee havens Germany and Sweden pay even less. Then there are the labour restrictions. Both Britain and Sweden have extremely tight rules regarding refugees working, meaning their impact on the job market is minimal. The Economist has argued that this is actually a problem and has called for countries to both accept the refugees and let them work. The newspaper points to studies showing that migrants are net contributors to the public purse, more likely to set up a business, and less likely to commit crimes than native residents. The paper argues that migrants have been shown to raise wages overall. Given Europe's rapidly aging population, this may be the route that many nations are forced to go. Number 1, it's the refugees who are really suffering. With the coverage of Europe's crisis tending to focus on the impact on the EU, it's easy to forget who the real victims are. For all the legitimate worries of many anti-migrant Europeans, it's the refugees who are really suffering. Every day, children are drowning in the Mediterranean as they try to flee persecution. On September 2, 2015, a boy named Alan Kurdi was found face down, washed up on a Turkish beach. He and his family had been fleeing the atrocities of Islamic State in the north of Syria and had hoped to reach Canada. He was 3 years old. His 5-year-old brother died with him. In Austria, a truck carrying 71 refugees was abandoned on a roadside in the sweltering summer heat. Everyone inside had suffocated. Among the dead were a 2-year-old girl and 3 boys, ages 8 to 10. By the time they were found, their bodies had decomposed so much that it was nearly impossible to establish an exact death toll.